Hello, everybody. Ann Louise here, your hostess for the First Lady of Nutrition podcast. And today we have a very exciting episode. It's all about unsafe at any meal, what the FDA does not want you to know about the foods you eat. And I have with me an FDA scientist, a former FDA scientist, Dr. Renee Dufault, who's going to share with us some of her groundbreaking research and how she's continuing to shed a light on the unsafety of food at any cost. Dr. Dufault, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate your having me on your show, Louise. Thank you so much.
You're entirely welcome. So tell us the story. You were working at the FDA. When was this? How many years ago? Can you set the scene for my listeners?
Sure. I went to the FDA in about 1999, and I had been doing cleanup work for the Environmental Protection Agency, so I transferred to FDA to start doing cleanup work for them. And so my primary job was to decommission laboratories and address the contaminants of concern in the buildings and on the properties, and make sure everything got cleaned up before the properties were turned over to private owners or whatever. And I finished all that work and I got bored, so one of the things I kept finding in the laboratory plumbing systems was mercury. And so we found out the mercury was actually coming from chemicals that laboratories routinely use. And these chemicals are used by the chlorine industry. So, and these same chemicals, as it turns out, because I was asked by the U.S. Geological Survey to do a mercury cycle model, which I did and presented at their conference. And what I found in preparing for that was the companies that were most using these chemicals that were produced with mercury and had mercury residue in them were the corn refiners and some of the food ingredient companies. So there were trace amounts. We decided to investigate high fructose corn syrup and found trace amounts of mercury in many of the samples. So anyway, we were getting ready to publish our findings, and the FDA, I shared them with the Center for Food Safety and so on. And with my collaborators, I had collaborators outside the agency at a couple of universities and another federal agency, and everyone ran their own tests and got the same results. And so the FDA Center for Food Safety did not want me to publish these findings. They wanted me to stop the investigation. So anyway, I decided I would have to retire early. I pursued the line of research so that the public would become informed. So I started investigating around 2005-06 and ended up retiring in end of 2007. So did some research, really good research with the Armed Forces Radiobiology Research Institute scientists at Navy Bethesda Hospital. We found out so much about the role of mercury in Alzheimer's, in different food products and so on. So I just had to retire and further the line of research because there was so much that the public needed to learn. So the book that I wrote and published in 2017 is the book we're here to talk about today. And this is really the result of all those years of research. And we've published, I've led the research and published with collaborators a number of articles in medical journals and continue to publish and learn that there's so much coming out now, especially from other countries, because they're more invested in not having what we have in the U.S., which is Western diet leads to Western disease. They want to prevent disease more so than the U.S. And so there's so much coming out now to support everything that we found our findings, and now there's even more interest in the U.S. all of a sudden is starting to become more interested, because when everyone else in the world is finding out what's going on, and the U.S. is like completely quiet on the issue because of the corporate influence, then you can only be quiet for so long when there's so much information coming out,
Oh, no.
What happens is people don't want to buy our products anymore. They ban, they just don't want to have them. We start falling behind.
So you're saying that, or you saw that there were many commonly eaten foods that were actually contaminated with heavy metals. Was it just the high fructose corn syrup, or what else was very high in mercury?
Well, we did, at the Armed Forces Radiobiology Research Institute, we did sample a whole host of processed foods, and we also sampled the same kind of food, but the organic version with a cleaner label. Mm-hmm. And we found mercury, we only tested for mercury in that study, and we found mercury was present in many of the highly processed foods, conventional type foods, whereas not in the organic. So they were using different, or not using certain ingredients. And then, so it didn't, later on, another group, Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, they studied foods with first and second ingredient high fructose corn syrup, and they found mercury in a lot of them and published those findings. And Canada followed up and did some studies of food products on their shelves with corn syrup and found mercury in many of those. So it was clearly an issue, the mercury. The FDA is well aware of the residues of lead and other heavy metals. They test the foods and they know that there are residues. In fact, many of the rules and standards that we go by, though, are codified in our Code of Federal Regulations, and they allow certain amounts of heavy metals based on the nature of the food ingredient and how it is made. For example, food colors, yellow 5, 6, and red 40 are examples of foods that are made from petroleum that comes from the ground, and so there is an expectation that you're going to have mercury and lead and heavy metal residues. So they have a law that says how much of the mercury, lead, and arsenic can have in those food ingredients. And they have to be tested and certified by an independent lab to so that these levels don't exceed a certain amount of allowability. And these, so anyway, these particular food ingredients have been on the market before there was even FDA. So what we're dealing with are food ingredients that have been around forever. And so those particular food colors are now, if you produce a food with those food colors in Europe or the United Kingdom, you have to have a warning label that says, warning, this product contains ingredients known to cause hyperactivity or inattention in children. So, and that's because United Kingdom researchers had done several studies and found this to be true. So anyway, Mexico has recently banned in many of their states the sale of highly processed junk food and sugar-sweetened beverages to individuals under the age of 18. So, it's starting to, different countries are starting to look at the food quality and have rules, We don't have those rules, and consequently, we have a tremendous amount of autism and ADHD compared to other countries, which we talked about in the publication. So, more than one publication. So, we have these problems, and when you have the school system is inundated with children that have these difficulties, we're looking at 15% of our kids now are receiving special education services. And some of these conditions that they have can be certainly prevented with proper food and by, proper diet. So, and certainly warning labels on foods containing harmful ingredients would help. That's already been shown to help in Europe. So, yeah, we have some issues here with our food supply that just have not been addressed.
So you say that the FDA routinely tests for lead. Is there unacceptable lead in many of our foods today?
Yeah, well, what happens is now they've got a new initiative, I think it's either at CDC, where they are trying to they're first going to address the baby food in the formula, because there's been contamination problems there. And when the youth are at that stage of development, it's, it couldn't be more harmful. So they are aware of the problems, and they are, trying to figure out ways for manufacturers, to start addressing these contaminants. But yeah, the way the U.S. does things is they have the manufacturers. They task the manufacturers with doing something voluntarily and with little oversight. And this is the problem there too. My biggest beef is that they don't provide warnings, labels, warning labels, and the public is not informed. Because I accept the fact that we live in a system where you can sell anything to anybody without regard. I mean, look at the pharmaceutical products, and you watch commercials on TV, and they tell you everything in the under the sun. Yet when you take this product, you wonder, well, who the heck would want to take it?
Right.
We should have similar warnings on the foods in the food supply that are detrimental.
So what would a consumer be most surprised at finding was toxic? In other words, can you give me an example of a seemingly healthy food that is actually quite toxic?
Well, first of all, nothing is toxic until you have enough of it, till your body has enough of it to bioaccumulate, okay? So you don't get a toxic effect until you're eating so much of something that your body can't excrete it or metabolize and excrete it fast enough. So you start bioaccumulating. And so I would say in my book, there are many, I have several tables in here, and the book incidentally does have free online healthy diet tutorial that for every chapter in the book, there are activities and discussion group questions, so it's perfect for a book club. And, like one table here goes over in chapter 4, the different food colors and how much arsenic's allowed in, say, blue 1, or how much chromium's allowed in blue 1, how much arsenic's allowed in yellow 6, how much mercury, and so on. Another, I think people might be surprised to learn that the bleach flour is often bleached with chlorine, which has allowable mercury. There's an allowable amount of mercury in chlorine because the chlorine is made with mercury cell chlor-alkali plant. So the bleached flour products are going to be a source of mercury. And one of our clinical trials, we found that the more processed food you eat, then the higher your inorganic mercury levels in your blood, and that corresponded to higher glucose levels. So when people white foods, and stay away from the white processed foods for cupcakes and cakes and all this stuff, that's not good for diabetes. Well, one of the key reasons is because you have the mercury residues, and that is what's leading to the elevated glucose, which we actually analyzed the NHANES, CDC's NHANES data with, I forget how many thousands of data, how much data there was, but found the same correlation. The higher the inorganic mercury in the blood, the higher the fasting glucose. So that's a problem, a surprise for some of your listeners. So you can't talk about, one or two things. You have to really understand the food supply, and that's what my book helps you do. You learn to understand the food supply if you do it in a book group, and everybody goes through the process together. Every week you read a chapter, you do your activities, your discussion questions, and you do it together. You will change your diet for good. And we know that changing diet permanently, changing lifestyle diet, is very difficult. So that's why I urge people to educate themselves and take the time to change their diets and move to healthy, and then you'll have a better outcome in your old age, because a lot of these conditions that we have in old age, Western diet leads to things like heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's. You can really, if you start early enough, you can really avoid having some of these conditions that make being old so devastating, really.
So uncomfortable. As my mother used to say, old age ain't for sissies. And that's so true. So many of my listeners are very aware of bleached versus unbleached flour and the detriments of processed foods. But what they're not aware of, and I want you to go into even more detail, is how deleterious mercury is to the system. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, like I said, first of all, well, mercury and lead, for example, and cadmium, they're called toxic and they're heavy metals, and they have no known purpose in our bodies, so they don't do anything for us. And every individual is different, their diet is different, and so you might, depending on your metabolism and your diet, how much healthy food you're eating and your magnesium and your calcium intake and all of these things from whole foods, then you could weather the storm of having something, a food now and then that has is going to have the allowable mercury levels. But if you if you're just eating processed food all the time and you're not looking at having 5 to 7 whole fruits and vegetables every day, then you're going to be accumulating these heavy metals in your body that are going to lead to neurological impairments and neuropathy, the things that make your body very difficult to, it's no fun being sick when you're old. It's not fun being sick anytime, but it's really hard when you're older.
So true. But, coupled with that, I'm thinking of people with mercury fillings, people that eat fish frequently. So you start bioaccumulating a toxic overload.
Well, the mercury fillings, we did a study on olfactory bulb, human olfactory bulb, and compared the olfactory bulb of an Alzheimer patient versus of a patient same age and sex who did not have Alzheimer's. And we found that the person with the Alzheimer's had the mercury amalgam, then more mercury in their olfactory bulb, because every time you chew, you get a release. It goes right straight up to your olfactory bulb. And one of the first symptoms of Alzheimer's is the not being smell. So the one thing that is really good for latching on to mercury in the system is selenium, because selenium binds to mercury, and it's a kind of a natural chelator, if you will. And one food that I include in my diet is Brazil nuts, and because they're the highest known source of selenium. Yeah. So a couple Brazil nuts every day in my smoothie, then if I do get any mercury from any source, then that that kind of it's I feel like I'm covering myself, insurance. But the fish is not the biggest issue for inorganic mercury. The issue with fish is when you're consuming so much fish, and the fish that you are consuming has more mercury in it than selenium. Mm-hmm. So where your fish from is key. Like here in Hawaii, we eat a lot of fish. And our scientists here have looked at the mercury selenium balance in our fish, and they have found that there is that the fish here the mercury is bound to the selenium. It's not harmful, to the effect that it might be elsewhere. It's a different environment, because it's different. The fish are have the different issues depending on how they're produced. If they're wild versus farmed, there's all kinds of issues there. What are they being fed if they're farmed? So anyway, fish is a whole different bailiwick, and I do encourage people to have wild Alaska salmon regularly, once a week at least, and definitely shellfish, shrimp, low level. These are, in my book, I have a chart that tells you what are the fish and shellfish with the lowest levels or zero, very little mercury. So we do need the fish that has healthy fat in there.
Yes.
So I'm not afraid. And it's just a matter of, eating the right kinds of fish to get the best bang for your buck.
So where are people getting lead from, Dr. Dufault?
Well, lead comes in the some of the food ingredients, allowable levels of lead, like I mentioned, the food colors. And then there are...
I know chocolate can be a hidden source of lead.
Chocolate, if it's an alkali product, you're going to find a little bit of mercury in it, possibly. Alkali, because alkali implies they're a chloralkali product. So lead is up to 10 parts per million allowed lead in netto, and beta-carotene, caramel, spirulina, titanium dioxide. Yeah.
Oh, how interesting.
So, yeah, those are the big ones for the lead.
And what about arsenic? And arsenic is the other biggie I think that you write about.
Yeah, like I say, so some of these ingredients have a lot, like the food colors. I mean, that arsenic's in the ground. It's a heavy metal. It comes up with the, a contaminant with the petroleum that they're using. So it's in all the, it's potentially up to 3 parts per million in the food colors. So it's rice can have arsenic in it depending on where it's grown. Where the food is grown, that brings us to the point of knowing where your food is coming from. And I always try to buy local. And actually, I grow a lot of my own in my garden because I know, know what I'm doing there. So, you want to get as much food locally that's not going to have added chemicals on it to keep it fresh for shelf life. If they have to ship it somewhere, there's all kinds of secret things they can, they can, like all the stuff that comes from South America is fumigated at the border. People don't know that, but it is. So you can have organic from another country and you'll be fumigated at the border. But anyway, your best bet is to buy locally grown, and put in the summer garden and freeze stuff so you know where it came from. And, that is your best bet, freeze and can. Going back, people who prefer to live in the cities, participate in a community garden. Their cities are now having community gardens and, put in the work to do that. You either pay now or pay later. So you either put in to have the right food now, or later you're going to pay for whatever it takes to survive your old age, basically.
So what do you do for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? I'm just curious, and I think my listening audience would be. Typical breakfast, lunch, and dinner from a former FDA scientist.
Well, I always have a salad every day, and organic lettuce, organic everything. Some of it I get right from my own garden. I grow tomatoes for months. It's always right there from the garden. I have some Chinese broccoli where they'll saute them with garlic, and they're marvelous. So I'll always have the healthy greens every single day in the salad, or if I'm doing a smoothie for a meal. Like this week, I've been using broccoli, and I'll have a couple fruits, a banana, and maybe strawberries or pineapple, and almond milk, and a couple Brazil nuts. And so, that's really, I know I'm getting a lot of goods there. You can use spinach. I always like to put a dark green in that smoothie. So every day there's a salad, nice healthy, and a smoothie. Try to get a smoothie in there. And then eat an apple, quite a bit of apples, not every day, but, I try to eat those apples, good for roughage. And in my metabolism, the carbohydrates are not good for me in that my body just doesn't, it puts on weight. So even though I do like bread and I love the organic bread, toast and so on, if I eat too much bread, then I'm in trouble. I start gaining weight. So I do stay away from the bread. And, I had some pad thai this week, and that's noodles, so staying away from the starchy carbs, the ice cream, things like that. I need to do that for myself. I do have protein. I love the salmon and the chicken and and I'll have a couple proteins a day outside of nuts, and because I'm not a vegetarian, but I don't want to overdo the protein, and certainly not the red meat. Breakfast, I'm usually very flexible on what I eat. I never eat the same thing every day. I mean, it's whatever's, I had made some rice with fresh vegetables, kind of like a stir fry. And so that, I like to cook a big pot of something and then eat it over a few days. So, a half a cup of rice and fry up an egg with that rice and the vegetables is really tasty in the morning for a breakfast. So I can't say I eat the same thing every day because I don't. Mm-hmm. And I don't plan my menu. I used to plan it more in advance than I do, but now I just keep the staples in. I keep the staples. And so then, I usually know what I'm going to have available in the next couple of days. But the key is learning which foods that are okay for your body that and then staying away from the foods that are not okay. So everybody's
very true.
With the carbs.
Very true. So where can people purchase Unsafe at Any Meal?
Well, it's available on Amazon, and that's where I get it when I want a copy. And that would be the place to go. And I would highly recommend using our online healthy diet tutorial with the book in a book study group, because you'll get more out of it in so many ways during this COVID era. And you can do a study group on Zoom, really. You can do a lot on Zoom. I have some cousins that are playing Yahtzee every day for the last 200 and some odd days on Zoom. So you could do a book study group on Zoom. And that's what the website for the nonprofit is www.foodingredient.info. So that's FOODINGREDIENT.info. And that if you go to the top of the webpage, you'll see Healthy Diet Tutorial. You click on that button, and then a whole menu will come down. It'll say Chapter 1, Module 1, Module 2, Module 3, and so on.
So your book is actually a study guide. This isn't just a book, my friends. This is an actual study guide.
Yeah, it is a study guide. It was. We actually ran 3 clinical trials, online nutrition tutorials, and had different audiences. And so a lot of the information, the activities and everything has already been successfully done with other groups, like, help people reduce their glucose level, help parents of learning disabled children learn to eat different. So now they realize that diet does impact their child's behavior. So it's been tried and true. That's why I recommend it.
So you came out with your book in 2017, am I correct?
Correct.
So did you have any blowback from the FDA when the book came out?
No, because it's indexed with all these references. I mean, everything I say, if there's so many references in this book, that everything I say is the fact, science-based fact. So there is no blowback. You cannot I haven't had any critical criticism on the book. All the reviews, there's been many, many reviews, and they're all really good. What can you say when you back it up with a science-based, evidence-based study?
How very true that is in most cases. So is there anything you'd like to leave my listeners with, Dr. Dufault, before we say goodbye?
Well, I guess the main thing is that you are responsible for your own health. And, the sooner you realize that, then the less you rely on others, then the better your outcomes are going to be. As far as, that would be my advice.
Well, I would agree with you wholeheartedly, and let me thank you for being my guest today. Unsafe at Any Meal, get it on Amazon. Dr. Renee Dufault, thank you so much for being with me today. And thank you, my dear listeners, for tuning in to yet another First Lady of Nutrition podcast. This is Ann Louise Gittleman, wishing you a wonderful rest of your week. Be safe, be healthy, be well. Bye-bye for now. Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Louise here with just one more thing. Thank you so much for being a fan of my work. And if you like this video, please check out all my other videos. Please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications.